You know, sometimes a race weekend hits so hard that it changes the entire mood inside a team, and Qatar was exactly that moment for Ferrari. You probably watched it happen in real time, but when Lewis Hamilton crossed the finish line in 12th place and Charles Leclerc scraped an 8th, it wasn't just another off Sunday. It felt like the moment both drivers finally said, enough. And honestly, who could blame them? This is Ferrari, a team built on history, pride, and championships, finishing miles away from the performance they promised at the start of the season. If you've been following Formula One long enough, you know that when Ferrari struggles, the whole sport feels it. But Qatar wasn't a struggle, it was a collapse. Hamilton looked drained, and not just physically. You could see it in the way he walked, the way he held his shoulders, the way he hesitated before speaking to the cameras. When he was asked what message he wanted to send to his fans, the silence that followed was uncomfortable, the kind that feels heavier than any words he could have said. And when he finally spoke, apologizing to the people who've supported him his entire career, it didn't sound like someone frustrated about a single race. It sounded like a driver who's carrying the weight of an entire season of disappointment. Leclerc wasn't any different. The guy is usually one of the most optimistic drivers on the grid, always trying to find that little spark of hope somewhere. But this time, he didn't even try. He straight up said the car had zero performance, and for him, that is a massive statement. He pushed like crazy, took risks he shouldn't have needed to take, and still ended up with a result that, in context, feels like a defeat more than anything else. Let me ask you something. Were you expecting both drivers to reach this breaking point at the same time? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments because I want to know what you thought when you saw their interviews. And before we keep going, if you're into straightforward, honest F1 breakdowns without filters, subscribe and help us reach our goal of 2,000 subscribers. Your support pushes this channel forward and helps us bring even more coverage your way. Because what Hamilton and Leclerc said next, and how they said it, reveals a lot more about where Ferrari truly stands right now. And that's exactly what we're going to get into in the next part. Let's take a closer look at Hamilton's moment of silence and what it really meant. When you think about Lewis Hamilton, you think about confidence, composure, and a driver who's always in control of the moment. But what happened after the Qatar Grand Prix didn't look like control at all. It looked like a man drained by a season that has taken everything out of him and given almost nothing back. His interview right after the race said more through silence than most drivers say in an entire press conference. When he was asked what message he wanted to send his fans, he didn't speak. He paused. And that pause wasn't for dramatic effect. It was the kind of pause that comes from someone who simply doesn't have the energy to pretend anymore. When he finally did speak, what came out wasn't frustration, anger, or excuses. It was an apology. An apology to millions of people who've supported him his entire career. You know how rare that is for a driver of his stature. 7 world titles, nearly 2 decades at the top of the sport. And he's apologizing because the car he was given couldn't get anywhere near the performance he expected. That moment summed up everything about his first year at Ferrari. 21 races, 0 podiums. A scenario nobody, not even his harshest critics, would have predicted when he announced he was leaving Mercedes. And that's the part that hits the hardest. Hamilton didn't leave a midfield team. He didn't leave a team in crisis. He left Mercedes, the place where he won 6 titles. He walked away from stability and comfort because he believed Ferrari could give him a chance to chase number 8. Now, he's staring at the real possibility of finishing a full season without a single podium for the first time in his career. Think about that. A driver defined by winning is now defined by trying to keep a bouncing, sliding, unpredictable car on the track lap after lap, just hoping it won't snap out from under him. That's not competition. That's survival. Let me ask you something directly. Do you think Lewis made the right call joining Ferrari? Tell me your honest take in the comments. One sentence. Defend him or roast him. I want to see your angle. And while you're here, if you want more straight, no-nonsense coverage of the real stories behind the races, subscribe and help us hit our next milestone of 2,000 subscribers. Your support genuinely makes a difference, because Hamilton's struggle is only half the story. Leclerc's frustration and the words he chose after the race show an even deeper issue inside Ferrari. And that's exactly what we're diving into next. If you've followed Charles Leclerc for any amount of time, you know he's the guy who always tries to find a silver lining, even during Ferrari's roughest spells. He's the driver who usually smiles through the set of frustration, who reassures everyone that the team is learning, improving, moving forward. But after the Qatar Grand Prix, that version of Leclerc was gone. What we saw instead was a driver who'd reached the edge of what he could tolerate, and honestly, it was striking to watch. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't dance around the issues. When he called the weekend incredibly difficult, he meant every word of it. You could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Not physical exhaustion, but the kind that comes from fighting a losing battle for too long. And the moment he said the team had zero performance, that was the clearest sign that something deeper is breaking inside Ferrari. For Leclerc specifically, that sentence was heavier than anything Hamilton said, because Leclerc usually avoids that kind of negativity at all costs. So when he says it, you know the situation has gone beyond frustration. It has become resignation. But here's what makes it even more telling. Leclerc was the better Ferrari driver all weekend. He pushed harder. He found the limit earlier. He took what he even admitted were risky, borderline stupid moves just to squeeze something out of the car. And what did all that yield? 8th place. Not a podium fight. Not a surprise climb through the order. 8th. And that result becomes even more painful when you remember that he started this season with real ambitions, with confidence that Ferrari had finally closed the gap to the front. To finish a weekend like this, pushing the car beyond where it should reasonably be driven, only to end up with a result that barely looks respectable on paper, that's the kind of thing that crushes optimism. Let me ask you something, straight. Who do you think actually delivered the better performance in Qatar, Hamilton or Leclerc? Drop a simple H or L in the comments and tell me why if you want to go deeper. I'm really curious how you saw it. And if you're enjoying this kind of honest, direct breakdown of what's actually going on behind the scenes in Formula One, make sure you subscribe and help us get closer to our goal of 2,000 subscribers. Every single person who joins really does help this community grow. Because Leclerc's honesty sets the stage for the biggest question of all. What exactly is wrong with this Ferrari? Not just emotionally, mechanically, strategically, structurally. And that's what we're unpacking next. The thing about Ferrari's situation right now is that it isn't just about one bad race or a handful of unlucky weekends. What Qatar exposed is a much deeper issue, a car that simply doesn't respond no matter what the team does to it. Hamilton said it plainly. They made setup changes, they tried different directions, they threw ideas at the car, and somehow it still got worse. That's a frightening statement when you think about it, because it means Ferrari isn't just lacking pace, they're lacking understanding. And in Formula One, when a team doesn't understand its own car, everything else starts to fall apart. The SF24 wasn't just slow, it was unpredictable, sliding, bouncing, snapping, understeering. Hamilton listed every nightmare trait a car can have, and he had to deal with it corner after corner for 57 laps. That's not the kind of car you race with confidence. That's the kind of car you survive. And when a 7-time world champion tells you he's fighting the thing just to keep it on the road, that should set off alarm bells inside any top team. Leclerc's side of the garage wasn't any better. Even with a setup he said felt slightly more manageable, the lap time didn't come. And that's another fatal sign. If a driver feels the car is improving but the stopwatch disagrees, it usually means the gains are superficial, comfort, not speed. In F1, comfort doesn't win you anything. Performance does. Ferrari had none. Add in the mandatory two-stop strategy that wiped out any chance of a creative race plan, and the team had nothing to fall back on. No pace, no strategic flexibility, no development fix. Just a car that wouldn't cooperate. Meanwhile, Red Bull, McLaren, and even Mercedes were pulling away. They weren't catching Ferrari. Ferrari was sinking. And this is where the championship picture gets ugly. Ferrari is now staring at fourth place in the standings, something unthinkable at the start of the season. They aren't losing ground by inches. It's by miles. It looks less like a temporary slump and more like the beginning of a larger slide, a trend that could easily carry into next year if something drastic doesn't change. Let me ask you directly, do you think Ferrari's problem is the car itself or the people developing it? Give me a quick vote in the comments. Car or team? I want to see where you stand. And before we head into the final chapter, if these deep dives help you make sense of the chaos in Formula One, hit subscribe and support the channel as we aim for 2,000 subscribers. Your support genuinely helps us grow. Because now it's time to look ahead to what Hamilton and Leclerc might do if Ferrari can't fix this, and whether the team risks losing them both. When a team reaches a weekend like Qatar, it forces everyone inside the garage to confront reality. And the reality for Ferrari is brutal. They are at risk of losing not just momentum, not just championship hopes, but potentially both of their superstar drivers. Because after everything Hamilton and Leclerc said, and didn't say, it's clear they've reached a point where patience is running out. Hamilton didn't leave Mercedes and walk into Maranello to finish 12th and apologise on live TV. He came to Ferrari with a purpose, to fight for wins, to chase that elusive 8th title and to end his career on his terms. But right now, he's fighting a car that doesn't listen, a development cycle that isn't delivering, and a season that has been nothing short of humiliating for a driver of his calibre. If Ferrari can't reassure him that next year will be different, what reason does he have to stay beyond the contract? Leclerc's situation might be even more delicate. This is a driver who has carried Ferrari through difficult times before, who has put his faith in the team year after year. But after Qatar, he couldn't even pretend there was hope. Zero performance wasn't frustration, it was disillusionment. And that's dangerous for a team that relies on him as its long-term foundation. If Leclerc stops believing Ferrari can return to the front, what keeps him from looking elsewhere when other teams would gladly build around him? The bigger question is whether Ferrari understands the urgency of this moment, because Qatar wasn't just a bad race. It was a warning. A warning that the gap to the front is widening. A warning that development has stalled. A warning that their drivers, the very core of their rebuilding plan, might not be willing to endure another season like this. And with the 2020 regulatory tribulation shift approaching, Ferrari can't afford instability. They need direction, they need solutions, they need the confidence of their drivers. Let me ask you something directly. If you were in Hamilton's or Leclerc's position, would you stay or would you walk? Tell me in the comments, stay or go. And before we wrap everything up, make sure you subscribe and help us reach our goal of 2,000 subscribers. Your support keeps this channel going and helps us bring you honest, clear F1 coverage every week.